Good morning, everybody. Well, first of all, thank you to the organizer, Ice, for having us here, having me here today. So I think we've heard a lot from my previous speakers about developing countries. I mean, the EIB is doing 90% of the activity inside the EU. Let me see if this works. So who are we? I think I'll be short on this, I've been told, but so we are owned actually by the 27 member states. So Italy is one of our shareholders, and we do 90% of our business inside the EU. And I think this is a bit of a, quite a unique feature in the sense that we have a lot of experience in the developed countries, and we can bring that, to the developing countries, where you will see in energy, we do actually, more than the average 10% that the bank does. And we are the largest, actually, multilateral lender, so percentage is one thing, but absolute numbers is also important. We are based in Luxembourg, but we have offices, all over in each countries. We have an office in Rome as well, and we have also offices, and we're growing also outside the EU. So the idea today is to give you a bit of a snapshot of what we do, both inside the European Union, because I think this could be interesting, and of course, also about what we're doing outside, which we're currently reorganizing. Yes. Okay, just to give you an idea of our lending volume. So we do 80, this is the group. So we have the EIB bank, and then we have the European Investment Fund, which is dedicated to more SMEs and venture capital. So I'm working for the EIB. What do we do? We finance typically large infrastructure projects. Okay, when I say large, I mean normally above 20 million euro investment costs. We can do smaller ones if they are particularly interesting. We heard about hydrogen. If there's a lot of innovation, we can do smaller ones. We finance smaller projects, but we do it through, let's say, intermediary banks. Okay? So who are our clients in energy? Normally, it is the company who's building and operating the power plant. And I know there are a lot of suppliers here, so normally those would not be our direct counterparts. But of course, our borrower will then subcontract the works. We do both public and private sector. So we heard public-private. Obviously, in the EU, the energy is mostly, well, the renewable energy sector is liberalized, so it's mostly private. But obviously, outside the EU, in Africa, in other countries, it is still mostly public, but we're beginning to having IPPs also in developing countries. And you see the breakdown within the various regions. So around 10% outside the EU. Okay, so we have decided, I would say, at the end of 2019, to focus on climate. And actually, the first choice we made was actually on energy. So we decided to while we acknowledge the importance of natural gas, for example, in many countries still, but we made a choice. So we focus on renewable energy, energy efficiency. And this was done at the end of 2019. And then we said also on climate, more generally, to have all our operations aligned to Paris and to have at least 50% of our financing either to climate or to environment. Too fast. So if we look at energy sector lending, so the level of lending is around between 12 and 14 billion euro. Since our energy lending policy was approved, you see that we focus more and more on renewables, energy efficiency, and networks, while you see all the rest being faded out. And actually 23% outside the EU, which compares to the 10% average. In renewable energy, so the bulk is wind and solar. You saw the peak last year, so we're increasing really our lending to renewable energy. And the board just approved for the EU to do 5 billion euro more a year in energy, but this means, as you see from the previous slide, mainly renewables, energy efficiency, and networks. Okay, I just wanted to have a slide on offshore wind, because here we had really, let's say, a major role in getting the industry done. It is really a European technology. And if you look back at 5 years ago, we probably had financed the majority of the projects. I mean, obviously now it's become more a mainstream technology, so we're not financing all the projects. But we're beginning to see offshore wind, at least as an idea, also in some of the developing countries. So we have a unique expertise in this technology. Of course, this is mostly fixed bottom offshore wind, but the new technology we're seeing in Europe is floating, which makes sense in deeper waters where it's not economic to do fixed bottom. We actually finance pretty much all the projects which are out there in Europe. The first one was in Portugal, and there were 3 in France, which we financed between this year and last year. And we think this can be a solution. So there are some countries also outside the EU who are thinking of floating. Morocco is an example. I have a slide on that later. Okay, well, this is just to give you a snapshot of the kind of, this is Iberia. We're doing a lot of solar in Iberia. They have a very good solar resource. We can have different financial products. This is all private sector, so we can do a long-term loan, we can do a short-term loan, we can finance the construction. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of the financial structure. We are seeing more and more projects which are not, of course, with a feed-in tariff like they used to be. They have private PPAs, and that's the new feature in Europe. We can finance, we have tenors which go beyond the PPAs, so we are beginning to take also higher risk in those projects. So it's a mainstream technology. The risk is now in Europe on the prices and on the market. And we're doing things we were not doing until 5 years ago. We see this happening also outside the EU. Obviously outside the EU, mostly the buyers are going to be governments, but it depends. I think Latin America is a very developed market for renewables, so there we have also projects with PPAs with private counterparts. Okay, we heard about hydrogen. This is something really new and which the EU is really pushing strongly. The Commission came out with a EU hydrogen strategy. There's a lot of talk about it. There are not so many projects out there, but we have financed one project this year, which was production of hydrogen from solar. And the user is an ammonia factory. And so the hydrogen is used to produce ammonia. Obviously, the cost of the green hydrogen is not yet competitive compared to the gray hydrogen. But this company is looking ahead. They have a strategic interest in green hydrogen. So it's a corporate loan, so we're not taking, let's say, a risk on the project. But from a strategic point of view, it makes sense. And actually, if you look at hydrogen, the first uses that we should think of is decarbonizing existing gray hydrogen use. So ammonia is a good example because it's used as a fertilizer in the agricultural industry. Again, just a snapshot to say, besides the mainstream projects, we do a lot of innovative projects. So hydrogen is one, but we've done a number of other projects in wave energy, in batteries, demand-side management, and we have a special product which is called Energy Demonstration Project, which we can take higher risk for these kind of innovative projects. These are typically, of course, in the EU. Okay, going to outside the EU. So we do 10% of our business. We have now created a branch, which is called EIB Global, to be even more focused. We have a dedicated capital and profit and loss, and we have a dedicated organization. We are strengthening our offices outside the EU. For example, in Africa, let's say our main focus, I would say, is neighboring countries and sub-Saharan Africa, but we also do, and I think you heard our name on some of our projects in Africa and in Latin America, but let's say that the first priority is Mediterranean, North Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. And for example, in Africa, we have now created a hub office in Nairobi. which will coordinate all the activities in Africa. We are also present in Abidjan, and we're cooperating with the African Development Bank. Just a couple of examples. This is not exhaustive, but just pick 2 countries where we really played a role in the energy sector. So in Morocco, we financed the 4 phases of the concentrated solar power project in Ouarzazate, which is one of the largest complexes in the world. We financed the onshore wind program of ENEL, and we're now financing, again, with Mazen, who's the promoter for Ouarzazate, a very interesting project because it's a combination now of both PV and CSP, which makes a lot of sense given that the cost of PV have really come down, but CSP has the advantage of being able to store the energy for some hours of the day. They're also thinking about offshore wind, and there we're doing a TA to help them identify the areas and to first have a first pre-feasibility of some first pilot project. I mentioned Nairobi. So here we have the hub office for Africa, and we've been there since 1978. So EIB Global is just a reorganization, but the bank has been active outside the EU, since its inception. We work under mandates from the European Union, typically. Again, we can do both public and private. I mean, all the geothermal complex in Olkaria, which is one of the largest, certainly the largest in Africa. There our promoter is Kengen, which is a public company. But Lake Turkana, which is the largest wind farm in Africa, and Reid and Eldosol, those are private projects. So they both have a PPA with the government, and they're examples of the first IPPs in Africa. With this, I close. Obviously, I will not have covered everything, but I'm here, for the rest of the day and also tomorrow, in case you have more questions.
Thank you.